Hi all, I have another amazing game of Magnus Carlsen to show you today. This is Magnus playing white against Liem Quang in the World Rapid Championship of 2019, round 10. Magnus kicked off with d4, we have d5, c4, and now a queen's gambit accepted, and now e4. Very interesting decision already. Magnus has played knight f3 before in his game against Domingue Perez in Moscow 2009, a classical time control game. That ended in a draw. Just want to show you just quickly, it had a symmetrical pawn structure which usually increases the chances of a draw. Maybe Magnus didn't want this sort of position, he wanted to spice things up. So e4, we have knight f6, e5. One upside for black is it looks like a nice blockading square, the d5 square. Magnus has allowed this. So if knight e4, by the way, this is really impossible in this position. Can you guess what white plays? If I give you 10 seconds. Okay, you can just actually win the knight here by playing f3. Yeah, f3. that's just, yeah, this is never going to happen, surely, in a master game. So anyway, e5, knight d5. We have bishop takes c4. The knight goes to b6. Interesting is bishop f5, not as bad as you might think. It does seem to say come and get b7. After queen b3, black has c6, and if queen takes, there's knight b6, and this is very dangerous for the white queen. For example, knight f3, bishop c8, and that's checkmate to the queen. So that's not such a terrible move, but white does better here with a move like knight e6. So a trap to be aware of there. And after e6, you should have a small edge here technically with white. So anyway, we have knight b6, so not moving this bishop yet. Hitting this bishop, that bishop moves back. And now the bishop comes out here, bishop f5. Knight f3, we have e6. Knight c3, knight c6. Bishop e3. So it looks as though there's a battle on the d4 square. We have bishop e7. You might think, could it be worth the outrageous looking bishop g4, wasting a tempo, but isn't that a valuable pin? You would have a point, I believe, because in some variations of the Slav defense, this kind of wasted tempo is used in some lines. But here, it seems after h3, bishop takes, queen takes. The queen's on a useful diagonal. So even if black wins a center pawn, after queen takes b7, this is pretty troublesome for black, because white's threatening to do something with the pinned knight potentially. If c5, then queen e4. This is a nice position, and white can eventually take time to take on d4 with a big advantage. It does seem a bit risky, this delayed pin. If we just look at this for a moment again, here, by the way, if knight takes b3, there's actually a powerful move in this position with rook d1. So after queen c8, check, and this is great for white, this position here. Yeah, the black king is pinned in the center. So it is a bit of a dangerous proposition, this pin. So in fact, we have bishop e7. Now both sides castle. If black tries to do anything too crazy, you know, the d5 break here, if black didn't routinely castle and try to sort of play like a mad hacker caveman like me, then d5 in fact is well timed and very, very effectual here. The knight can now, after bishop takes b6, that's we're running with tempo, and the knight then slips into d4, hitting f5, and it's a total disaster for black. For example, like this, it's just very unpleasant. There's tactics, but they all favour white ultimately. So black just castled. We have a3. This position has been seen before in the game Ding Liren against Hari Krishna, and Ding actually played h3 here. Ding Liren played h3, and that actually it sort of went in black's favour. This is a quick, just to show you the start of that. Yeah, white was kind of provoked, but black kind of did actually a queen sack, and eventually went on to win that. So that's a very interesting game. In 96 moves, a long grueling game there. But a3 was chosen here, not playing h3. We have knight a5, bishop c2, And now queen d7. It looks as though black should really play bishop takes c2 here. Maybe black was concerned about h7 and just thought that the pressure on the d file was enough. Queen d7 looks a little bit counterintuitive as well, because it's a pawn coming away from the center. If bishop takes c2 as an example, the engine seems to suggest also that, you know, the position should be about equal actually, but I believe this looks like the best way that black should play it on initial analysis anyway. This doesn't seem entirely terrible for black, this kind of position. White's got dynamic play here clearly, and nice, you know, bits in the center, but it seems as though that would be the logical way to play it. Bishop takes c2. Just look at this again. If rook ad1, maybe this is a little bit more precise, and white can try and get an advantage. Maybe white can claim a small advantage, but anyway, we have actually the strange move queen d7. Yeah, I would say slightly controversial. So Magnus does take on f5, e takes. So we're going to get a demonstration here. Can Magnus actually take the advantage in this position with a pawn duo, or is it too fragile on this d file? In fact, Magnus does venture d5, but you'll note it does actually open up the bishop, and so that could be eliminated, the b6 knight, which is influencing d5. Knight ac4 is played. If rook ad8, yes, white can use that elimination option. Play queen e2 to stop any pesky knight c4. And this position is very comfortable for white. For example, here, you know, white can pick out a pawn. And yeah, it just seems very, very, very comfortable on rook ad8. So knight ac4 was played. And we do have bishop takes b6 here. There's no point going backwards. Although even here, going backwards, well, maybe there is a point going backwards. It seems as though with queen e2, you know, black can't take there because of the c4. And white can still get a nice position. It's not as clear though. So bishop takes b6 is simplifying as well with this pawn duo. Queen b3, so that vacates d1 for a rook to support d5. This is like a classic advanced pawn duo situation. It's quite rare to kind of see this in a grandmaster game. They say the pawns on d4 and e4, you know, is a nice principled opening if you get your pawns in the center like that. But the advanced duo, for me, I think one big perk about this, you know, black has to be worried all the time about d6 and e6. Not what the pawns actually just literally attack, but how they change the rest of the pieces. You know, the pieces are being liberated on these pawn pushes. So that's the big concern. There's big contextual change implications from this pawn duo, that they support both d6 and e6 together, and the resulting, you know, context changes are dramatic. We have rook ad8, rook ad1, rook fe8, rook fe1. So it looks like a super pretty position. In fact, you know, the two rooks classically there, the two knights classically there, and you could argue the two center duo classic advanced pawns here, which you rarely get to see in grandmaster games. So black here plays g6. Okay, this means a few things. The queen doesn't have to nanny the f5 pawn sometimes. But also, you know, maybe even here on bishop f8, e6 is dangerous. For example, here, this doesn't look too good. Liberating the queen, you can see how the pieces get super liberated sometimes. And, you know, in this scenario, this is even possible. Outrageous stuff like this, a king hunt out of nowhere could be possible. You know, it's got big implications, these duo pawns here. So anyway, bishop f8 wasn't trying. We have g6. And now, Magnus actually builds on the central advantage by pushing a flank pawn. It's the dreaded form pawn attack. Or is it? Is it just to open the h file? Install a form pawn, which, as you know, I'm a great fan of form pawns. It would potentially be vulnerable, though, surely, a form pawn. Because black has a dark square bishop without a counterpart. Putting things on dark squares, isn't that in principle a bit dodgy? We have king g7, h5, and the bishop now goes to bishop, you know, on c5. It posts itself on c5, which means actually it's going to take quite a while. If white did manage to get a form pawn and push the king back, it will take quite a while to attack it. here, just to look at this horrendous looking move in principle, which would be in the spirit of e takes f5, we do have the isolated pawns, and I think just queen c2 here as an example on e6, you can see that this is not going to go very well for black. This position, the pawns are a bit ripe like apples, and there's all sorts of things going on in white's favour on both sides of the board. So anyway, as an example, bishop c5, queen c2, a5, and now queen c1, supporting the potential fawn pawn, queen e7. And in fact, this ability for the pawns to really change the context of the position is maximized with queen f4. This now means that if this button is pushed, these are like two buttons that white has at his disposal. If that button is pushed, the e6 button, it comes with a bonus of liberating the queen. Okay, there's no bishop on a2, by the way, so d6 doesn't have anything, a weight behind it or anything, but the queen, definitely, there's a weight behind the queen. So it's fascinating, these two central buttons white has. Knight d7, and now, this is maybe a little bit of a slip up. White plays a forcing move. Maybe this was missed, but it really means that the bishop will never be able to return back to f8. Well, not for some considerable time after a takes, bishop b6. Because if bishop takes b4, can you guess what does white have here? White's plan win. If I give you 10 seconds, what would you play here with white? Okay, it's only protected by the queen. In fact, so clue. Okay, d6 interrupting the protection of the bishop. And flicking h6 check just for fun, and then take here. Peace up, thanks very much. So anyway, the bishop went to b6. If it goes to a7, d6 again, this position gives it a nice e7 square, and that's a big tempo gain. The e7 square for white and the fawn pawn. This is really a super dangerous scenario. Here, threatens knight takes f7, checkmate with that fawn pawn. And here, knight d5, a big tempo gain again, trying to quick kick the queen off certain diagonals potentially. It's just a very, very bad position. Yeah, there's too much going on in white's favour here, too many threats, basically. So yeah, this is just a disaster scenario example. So okay, we have actually bishop b6. I mean, that bishop on a7 is also a liability for rook a1s as well. At least it's protected there on b6. Pardon me. So we have h6 check, king g8, d6, now queen f8. If c takes d6 here, knight d5, this position is pretty dangerous after e takes. The knight is thankfully, well, for white, protecting e1. So this is possible, and if that's the best move, there's no other move. Yeah, that's really hopeless. So not too good there, this scenario. And if queen f8, e takes, and here knight e7 check and knight g5. This is, again, as you can imagine, it's pretty disastrous for black. So yeah, it's like white has two huge buttons in the center, and one of them is being used now, the d6, which gives knight d5. So even if it's not bishops behind these pawns, the knights get key squares with tempo. We have queen f8. And now the other button, believe it or not, is pushed. So this activates the queen as well. So the pawns both on the 6th rank now, crashing through. And these pieces just, artistically placed, classically placed. And the fawn pawn as a bonus. What more could you dream of with white? We have f takes e6 being played. If rook takes e6, rook takes, f takes, d takes c7 is winning material because it's opening up the rook against d7. So if rook c8, rook takes d7. So e6, f takes is played. Now d takes, and we do have this disaster scenario. Yeah, the d7 is dropping off anyway. So we're near the end of the game, actually, as you might suspect. Rook e7, that's taken, queen takes, and now Magnus finishes with, guess what, for 10 seconds, white's play here. Okay, knight d5, and the game ended here. And Yeah, Magnus made it look remarkably easy to play this game. And I have, tried to see, I've tried to ask, what is going on here? I've tried to play through this several times before presenting it to you. What is it about this game? Why was it so easy for white to play these positions? And I think the philosophical point, which I like to arrive at from games, otherwise there's just endless variations. If there's any philosophical point, it's as if the advanced central pawn duo acted like two gigantic buttons, liberation buttons for white's pieces. So it's not just bishops potentially or queens being liberated, it's knight squares, become available. That option to completely open the centre and then use the resulting piece pressure behind that pawn duo. And white's position was so classically constructed with the rooks on d1 and e1. It also makes a kind of vivid artistic impression at the same time as a functional impression of those two pawns being extremely dangerous together in the centre. So a very, very interesting game. If the game continued here, by the way, if queen f7, another huge tempo gainer, knight g5, and then knight f6 wins the queen. It's total disaster, isn't it, really? Where else? If queen f8, then knight takes b6, just winning that. It's better that black resigned. Okay, it's better that black resigned than the final position. So the game ended here, quite crushing. Magnus is really... It's said that Magnus is even better at the faster time controls relative to the other grandmasters. And this game, it was just a real crushing game in so many levels. Maybe Magnus has been influenced by Leela Zero for the form pawn part of this whole strategy to complement the classical setup. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this game as much as me. And if you did, also check out Magnus's first ever course at Chessable. You can find that at Kingscrusher TV, that link below, /Magnus course. An amazing course to check out. Really interactive, lots of video content, well worth checking out. Okay. Comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes, all appreciated. Thanks so much.
Chess is simple. You just make the right moves.